if you are an engineering manager, you should be a very technical person
Yeah.
because it's your job to be able to, you know, come up with like technical solutions. If your team is struggling, that's why you should be able to jump in and help make decisions, understand the trade-offs. Doesn't mean you need to be kind of very hands-on, but like you need to understand the technologies, you need to understand the trade-offs, you need to understand the opportunities. And if you're not very close to the technology, then you're not going to be able to do your job successfully, an aspect of your job successfully.
Today's guest is Maria Gutierrez, who is VP of Engineering and Operations at Personio. Before Personio, she was VP of Engineering Strategy and Operations at Twitter and also held engineering leadership positions at Intercom, Free Agent, and Living Social. During the interview, we talked about how to build healthy and impactful engineering organizations as they scale. We touched on everything from processes to remote work, development cycle, hiring, structuring teams, and more. So let's dive right into it after a short word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Swarmia, the engineering effectiveness platform for modern software organizations. Swarmia gives engineering leaders, managers, and teams full visibility into business outcomes, developer productivity, and developer experience. CTOs, VPs, and engineering directors use Swarmia to answer questions like, is the work we are doing moving the business in the right direction? How are our strategic initiatives progressing? With these insights, they are able to proactively eliminate bottlenecks. Engineering teams, on the other hand, use Swarmia to speed up code reviews, identify and fix slow CI builds, and improve collaboration. Swarmia is trusted by hundreds of modern engineering organizations. You can read more and get started with the 14-day free trial at swarmia.com. Hey, Maria, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi, Luca. Thanks for having me.
So I'm so excited to be able to chat with you. You are VP of Engineering at Personio, who is one of the largest HR software companies in the world and one of the largest tech companies in Europe. I have to say, full stop. But even before that, you have had such a long and successful career with leadership roles at some of the most influential, fastest growing tech companies in the world, like Twitter, Intercom, Living Social before that. So one of the reasons why I'm excited to chat with you is that I think we can really try to connect the dots and figure out what makes successful engineering teams successful, since you have seen so many. So to break the ice, I would love to have you tell us more about yourself and your career journey, which looks incredible.
Well, I started my career in software engineering in about the year 2000. Before that, I'm originally from Barcelona, and my first degree actually was in journalism. When I was back at
Wow.
home, I decided to move to Scotland. Well, just come here for a year to learn English. And then decided to stay in Scotland. So I knew working as a journalist was not going to work out for me. So I went back to university to do a conversion master's in software engineering. At the time, they
Okay.
were looking for more people to get into it. And that's how it started. After I started my master's 6 months after I got an internship. And from there, I was able to kind of get a job, more permanent job with the same company in one of the companies here in the financial sector. And after a few years, I decided that I was really excited about it and I wanted to learn more. So I went to a smaller kind of games company where I was able actually to learn more about like the whole craft
Okay.
from the beginning. Like how do you get the requirements all the way to supporting things in production and everything in between. And that was very lucky move because I kind of found there some great mentors, people that really helped me start to love the craft and to think of best practices for becoming an engineer. And after that, I was in different companies like Adobe. The Living Social was a very rapid growing business
Yeah.
back in 2011. And then from there, I went to Free Agent, Intercom, and then Twitter before here coming at Personio. But a lot of the companies I've worked at have been in this very rapid growth
Yeah.
environment. So it's been a very interesting time to learn about what does it take to build kind of different type of
Yeah.
organizations that are really moving fast and with a lot of changes around them.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an inspiring story, especially because your story starts in a kind of an unconventional way, right? The degree in journalism. So sometimes we think that people think that to get eventually, a job like VP of engineering at Twitter, you have to, come out of Stanford or, just this is just for the very few. Instead, you can really learn through maybe great mentors and great experiences and get there. So, and as you said, many of the companies you worked at experienced like hyper growth, super fast growth, and that's one of the most daunting things for teams and engineering teams. I think people say it's what breaks teams and companies many times because it's challenging, to structure teams, processes, keep the culture. So I'm curious what you have seen that it worked in those situations. How did you manage to organize teams that were successful under such pressure and growth stages?
I think more than what works, I've seen a lot of what doesn't work
Yeah,
and what breaks. And I think when you're working in that environment, you have to be prepared to see a lot of things breaking and a lot of dysfunctions happening because your context and everything around you is changing
yeah,
all the time. So no many things, even when you start to get on top of something, things have changed, the context or like the amount of customers or where you are, the size of the team, that there's always going to be things that are not operating in a very efficient way.
yeah,
And that's okay. I don't think we should aim for perfection. Is more about, are you making progress in your
mm,
goals? So there's two ways that I've seen company breaks and why then I've
yeah,
applied kind of some of those lessons learned. One is when the business maybe originally had a lot of success, but as it starts to become a bigger business and there's more expectations, whether it's from customers or investors, maybe that business model wasn't as
yeah,
strong as originally looked like. And maybe that was a little bit the experience that I had at Living Social. So it's super important to me to have that clarity of what it is that you're doing as a business, the health of the business. How are you going to make money, not just
yeah,
spend money? And so putting some processes and some really good understanding around that is super important, especially for engineering leaders, because a lot of times it's very easy to get caught up just
yeah,
in, okay, what is happening with the technology, what things are we building, but it's super critical that you are very business aware
yeah,
and that you ensure that what you're doing actually is moving the needle for the business.
yeah,
So that's a failure mode if you don't do that. The other failure mode is actually the business has great opportunity and business opportunity, but as an organization you are not delivering great quality products, or you're not moving as fast as the business
mm,
needs you to scale to support the opportunity in front of you. So that's more kind of then into the operations, and you get into, okay, how can we move faster as an organization? How do we build more quality products that customers really kind of love and are getting a lot of value? And then that's a different set of problems to have. A lot of times as well, it's like, can you even find the people that you need to be able to deliver on those ambitions? So what I've found useful in the past is to be very intentional. It's like, do we really understand our goals and strategy and where we're going and what does success look like? Do we have really strong execution, and what does that look like in the business that you're supporting? And then your people, is like, do we have the right skills? Do we have the right people to deliver and to actually execute on
yeah.
those things?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And when you say failure mode, so failure looks like it might be, of course, a complete failure that the business fails, but it might even be maybe the company is there, the business is there, but you end up with a dysfunctional team that is caught into, technical debt or maintenance all the time, and it's not able to keep up with what it should be for the business. That's what you mean.
Exactly. It's like sometimes, you can do a lot of damage as an engineering leader if you don't set up your organization to be able to deliver on what the business needs to do. I think one perfect example, and we always hear it as engineers, it's like, hey, when are you gonna launch this product? Or like,
Yeah.
like we don't like commitments, we don't like deadlines, but actually it's very meaningful. Like it's very different to launch a new product that is gonna bring certain level of revenue in the next 3 months that actually waiting 2 years before you put it in the market. And that can completely make or break kind of that business, not just on their ambitions, but like you're leaving the door open for competition to come in and move faster and suddenly start to take kind of your customer base. So those are like, if you're not moving kind of at the speed that the business needs, and then you can have a perfectly running organization building great quality solutions, but if they're not in the hands of your customers, it doesn't matter, and
Yeah.
there's no point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's tricky to figure out probably the right balance between going fast and shipping things that are about the product or about the business, and at the same time keeping the bar of quality in a way that teams are not slowed down by technical debt, and investing in platform and things like that without it becoming detached from the actual goals of the business.
And that's why you need to be very business aware. If you know that as a business, you want to expand to new markets and suddenly you are going to have this demand for a lot of new features, you need to be getting ahead and think, okay, like how are we going to accelerate kind of the development that we do in the team? And sometimes it might be, hey, we need to bring more people, but that doesn't always kind of solve the problem. So it's like, okay, like it's taking us a lot to do all these steps to get things in production. Actually, sometimes a much better option is like, how do we invest in a platform or on simplifying kind of the removing the friction of being able to develop, because that ultimately is going to allow you to move faster but also build kind of more robust solutions.
Yeah.
So I think that's there's the trade-off. Sometimes if you're in a small business that is just trying to find a product market fit, you just want to try as many things as possible to make
Yeah.
sure that you find the thing. If you are more later on, you have a big customer base and a lot of people depend on you, you might have to actually make sure you put a lot more focus on the reliability of the solution, or like, your security practices and all of the other things that customers expect. If you are going to be, if you're a very, very large company, suddenly you have as well, maybe kind of financial, from the markets or security constraints and kind of different type of kind of legal kind of
Yeah.
expectations and compliance that you need to meet. So you always need to be a little bit ahead of like what it is the thing that the business needs and how am I going to set up that organization to deliver on those things and not be the blocker.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have spoken about small businesses and large businesses alike. Have you found some common signs and things that make teams successful and high performing, like saying that most of the high performing teams have these factors in common, and I can really say that they're great by looking at this?
I think probably the I always when I think about high performing teams, what
Yeah.
does that look like?
Yeah.
Is a team that has a very clear purpose. They know what they're building, and they know that the time that is spending on doing something is going to add value,
Yeah.
or they're going to learn very quickly and adapt if it doesn't. Kind of, so how do you measure that impact, and how connected are you to the customers? I think is super critical for any engineering team to be very, very close to their customers as well. Not, you don't want to delegate that just to product management or research, etc. It's like, it's our job to understand the impact of the work, and then can you actually focus on executing on the things that you need to build,
Yeah.
and can you make decisions fast, etc. And then, so yeah, so high performing team, are you clear on what you're building and the purpose, the impact that the work is having? Can you actually focus and get the work that you need to be doing kind of done and remove any friction
Yeah.
from that development process? And
Yeah.
then do you have the right skills in the team and the capacity to be able to build the things at the level of complexity, well,
Yeah.
level of simplicity that you can aim for?
Yeah.
And then how do the people in your business are working and collaborating with each other? So I think for me, that's like, if all those things are taken, that's a pretty kind
Yeah.
of a high performing team, robust, delivering impact, collaborating well, and no wasted time, being efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the theme about friction and being able to develop and ship continuously and with minimal friction is such an important one. And fortunately, I think in recent years has been backed more and more also by research, about what good developer experience look like and what we should aspire to, shipping continuously, small batches. And I think one of the things companies struggle with is that this looks rather easy as long as you're like a small team or a small startup, but then it's like this friction increases naturally the larger you grow, and then companies and leaders sometimes don't know exactly how to keep that kind of startup speed. When the company goes larger, whether you should break the company into small teams that operate autonomously, or you should invest more in platform. And so a question might be, how do startups scale while staying startups when it comes to shipping fast and keeping that friction minimal? Have you seen recipes that work and general lessons?
Yeah, I mean, a larger organization is always going to be a much complex system, and there's
Yeah,
always going to be, the larger you go, the more friction, the more communication lines. I think what's important is to always be very uh, conscious of questioning how you operate as a business, and don't let things just grow by themselves. It's very easy sometimes to put processes in place because you're solving something, but you realize 5 months down the line, a year down the line, actually that thing is not needed anymore, but we still have that friction
yeah,
in there. So you should always be questioning what is getting on the way, and like just not assume that because something has been done before is
yeah,
the right thing to continue doing it.
yeah. That that's a great point, and I think one of the biases that we have sometimes is that we always tend to fix problems and do things by adding more things, and we consider less often that we can fix something by subtracting or removing pieces of the process, making things simple.
100, it's like code, sometimes it's not about adding more features, it's about cutting down and like what is really needed. Can we clean up things around us, because it's all those little things that start really slowing down your organization. At Personio, we just the last few weeks I've been in Munich, in some on sites, kind of leadership on sites, and then with the rest of the team. And that was one of the big topics. It's like, okay, what is the thing that is getting, what are the things that are getting on the way of us to move faster? And very consciously start to question those things and say, okay, is it technology? Is it tools? How do we address that problem? Is it the ways of working, how we collaborate, how we are organized? And you have to be very conscious of always be questioning those things, because otherwise you very slowly, inevitably start as kind of a slowing down as an organization.
Yeah. May I ask, how large is the product and engineering team at Personio right now?
I think product and engineering, we're about, I think it's about 700 people
Wow.
in product engineering and design. So it's a little bit less, I think it is. But yeah, we are a large organization. So um, that takes a little bit coordination, and that's the difference with a small startup is that when you want to do something, it's very quickly. You get
Yeah.
alignment with a few people. It's like, let's go, let's do it. When you have a larger group, you need to be a little bit more intentional about the changes so that you don't bring chaos
Yeah.
into the space. Yeah.
And it's grown fast, right? Because I remember it was maybe a couple of years ago. There was this giant round of 200 millions that was announced by the company, and I remember that because maybe people in the US are more used to this kind of headlines, but in Europe, it's a very big deal.
It is. We've grown a lot, especially the last year. We grew considerably. We have big plans to continue to expand both the product and what we can offer to our existing customers, but then new applications, new markets as well. So there has been quite a bit of investment to grow and really start building up a lot of that new functionality.
Yeah. So another thing, because when I prepared for this interview, I went through some of your recent talks and interviews, and I got into the fact that you have been working remotely, and you have had remote work experiences for a long time, for more than 10 years, I think. And before, I would say, before it was cool, even, right? Before the shift to remote under COVID, etc. So I'm curious about your experience about this, and because I think coupling remote and distributed work, even with hyper growth, it's even more challenging. And whether you think, and what you think about maybe this kind of backlash now that there is, especially in big tech, with this return to office policies, and what do you see for the future about remote work for startups and general? Do you think it's here to stay at the general level, or it will kind of divide companies based on different cultures?
I think there's going to be different approaches for
Yeah.
different businesses. I think there's no going back in the idea
Mm.
of there are jobs and companies that will always choose as their location strategy to do remote work. That doesn't mean is what it should be for everybody,
Yeah.
and what is right for every business. So I think I think businesses need to be very, very conscious on their talent approach. Is it, and location strategy? And that is a competitive advantage. How do you decide to approach it? Needs to fit your business, your needs, but also the values for your company and the ways of working. So I think there's no right or wrong answer. I'm very supportive of companies that are fully collocated, hybrid, fully remote. What is important is that whatever decision people make, they're super intentional about
Yeah.
it, and what are the benefits, that why do they think that is the approach that is gonna make them win kind of in their space,
Yeah.
and just leverage the best practices for either. So I personally have benefited very much from being able to work from home,
Yeah.
but I know people that really struggle and that they really don't enjoy it. So it's not for all companies, and it's not for all individuals either. Yeah.
Yeah. So you think that the choice is not much, I mean, at the individual level, but you have to make a cultural choice at company level about what you want to become and what kind of people you want to reach out to.
What 100%. I think if you, whatever you decide, like, I'm a big fan to being intentional about how you enable your employees to be successful, and the strategy that you take is going to be different depending on your situation. So if you want really kind of daily collaboration and people just like brainstorming all the time, you probably want kind of that very close collocated environment. And then you set up your offices, you set up whatever you need to make that as enjoyable and efficient as possible. If you decide to go remote, there's a whole different level of things that you need to take into account, from the tools that you use to make sure that that
Mm.
collaboration is as successful, or even your communication strategies. Like, are you going to be remote but really rely on a lot of synchronous video
Yeah.
communication? In that case, you probably want to be a little bit restrictive with your time zones and have teams working from
Yeah.
home or, distributed, but more kind of closely from a time zone point of view, because otherwise you're never going to have
Sure.
time to talk. If you want to open up more for the whole world, then you might need to invest a lot in having more of a writing culture, or like how more of an async culture. So all those things, they're actually not very easy to implement, and everybody that is there needs to be bought in. So as a business, you really need to make sure that you put the investment to set up people for success in whatever kind of way that you think you need to run the business. And then even things like budget. I remember like Living Social was the first place that I started to work remotely. Before it was the thing to do, before it was cool, and it was 2011, and the tools were very primitive.
Yeah.
And I remember that's when things started to come up, like more video conferencing, some of like a kind of to be able to pair program, and there was
Yeah.
a bunch of things that we were starting to experiment with, and it was all good whilst the business was doing well. We could meet every few months with your team, and then you just needed that connection in person for a little bit, and then you went home and you could be very productive. But I remember when we had to start cutting down costs because we weren't doing very well as a
Yeah.
business, and suddenly we stop any travel
Mm.
for people that work remotely. And actually that was super damaging because you could see kind
Yeah.
of this separation. And so those things are things that you really need to be very, very intentional about. It's like, hey, if you have a distributed team, you need to ensure you have the budget to potentially kind of get them together every so often and work, because otherwise things will fail. Or are you investing in tools that everybody in the company has access to? Or are you restricting just access to a few people, so it's very difficult for people to get the information that they need when they need it, regardless of the time zone that they're in? And those are all things that you really need to think through how you're going to approach it.
Yeah. So building, helping people to build relationships intentionally and create bonding within the team, especially, you mean?
That's, I mean, that's been my experience. I haven't worked in a fully remote environment, so I think there are different companies that have been very successful at doing that, and it might not be as necessary if you have a good setup. In the way that I've been working, that has been more this hybrid mode.
Yeah.
It's been critical for me to be able to connect every so often with people, just, get to know them a little bit better. When you go back home, kind of that relationship is very different once
Yeah.
you've had an opportunity to kind of talk to those people in person. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think trust is one of those things that just makes everything faster. When there is good relationships and trust in place, then the whole workflow and process move faster
Mhm.
naturally. And that's what I hear from many people I talk with, that remote makes harder. And are there other things in your experience that, with respect to working in real life in an office, tend to break when you work remotely, in terms of processes or how you do things, or meetings, or whatnot?
Yeah, it depends on what you value. Like, if your company doesn't have a culture of keeping a strong knowledge management accessible, that's normally the thing that I
Yeah.
see as the big problem. If information just passes between people talking to each other, and then you are really constraining kind of who has access to that information, how people can contribute, and that can be quite damaging. That happens a lot of times when you have a kind of your head office. A lot of the more senior people maybe are in the office. They're all making decisions, and they're not passing them. It's very difficult for anybody that works in a, from home, or that doesn't have access to a lot of those relationships or information to actually be able to go up the ladder, because suddenly there's just a barrier there. But if the company is very open and there's like all the information is very available, transparent, the things happen online and get recorded, things get shared, then everybody has the same access to the information to be able to make an impact. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I would watch out for, that you're not kind of discriminating, maybe is a strong word here, but like that you're not setting up for failure certain groups of people just because of where they happen to be working from.
Yeah. And I'm curious what you think about many of the big tech issuing return to office policies and pedaling backwards, on this. What do you think that they are not successful at keeping the company and the teams remote and distributed, whether it is just, pressure from shareholders, or it's maybe that it's generally hard to move from working all together in offices, because they were distributed even before, but just in separate offices, to remote friendly or remote first environments. I don't know.
I think it's hard to say. Like I behind those decisions, there's always a lot of human impact. Like
Mm,
if you've been hiring people and you've been telling them, yeah, it's okay, it's okay, we're remote friendly, you can work from anywhere. People build their lives around those
yeah.
decisions, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, you get in a situation where, oh, actually, what I had planned, now I need to make big changes in my life to either continue working or decide that I can't do it anymore. So there's a big repercussions, and you can argue that whilst it's been useful for those companies, they've made it work, and now maybe we're changing the path. I think companies should be able to change their approach.
Mm,
I think what is driven that decision, is it really true data, and they have like actually operating in this mode is definitely not as productive or efficient as in this other one. And if they feel confident that that's the reason, and that they can improve the output of the organization, then their businesses, they need to make the decisions that they think is best for them. I think is sometimes maybe things get mixed, and it's like, okay, what are we really trying to achieve, and is this situation, and maybe it's just the investment, they just don't want to put the investment on making it work because it's more complex. So I'm not a fan of companies completely changing kind of
yeah.
your agreement and how you've decided to set up, because it has a big impact. But I think each business should be, they should always be able to make the decision of what is the best way to run the
Yeah.
business. Yeah.
Do you think that the choice between working remotely or working in an office has different impact on different roles? For example, managers versus engineers, based on the processes you have in place? Because what I hear many times is that engineers are completely fine, but managers sometimes, especially when processes are not well established, they need more communication. You get to do more meetings, and they're uncomfortable. There are calls, and so managers suffer a little bit more from this. I don't know if that's your experience as well.
It depends. I've seen people do it very successfully in all type of
Yeah,
roles, and I've seen people not being able to do it at all
yeah,
in all types of roles as well. So there's a big it depends
yeah,
caveat here. I think like the more junior people, or people that are just early in their career, by default they need more coaching. You can absolutely do more coaching online as well, but it might be easier. It's like you have to very intentionally go and call somebody and say, hey, can you help me with this or whatnot? And depending of how confident they are, there is a barrier there, because you don't want to be a nuisance, or you don't want to disrupt people. It's a lot easier if you sit next to somebody you are struggling, and that person can see that you are struggling, and they might just jump over and say, hey, no, actually you can do this. So there's certain
Yeah.
things that, especially if you're building your how you work, you've just come out of university, you've never had a job,
Yeah.
and you're starting to build kind of that new way of operating as an adult. It might be helpful to be around people. If you live alone, you might want to go somewhere where you can be with some people as well. But that doesn't mean that it cannot work. I've seen fairly, more junior people being very successful as well doing it remotely. I think it's down to the type of people.
Mm-mm.
Like if you are somebody that you are going to be very proactive about unblocking yourself, getting, help from people, etc., you're likely to be more successful than if you're somebody that just don't, you kind of are there in pain for days trying to figure something out because you are not willing to go and ask somebody that's just not going to set you up for success.
Yeah, and I think this also comes back to the idea we talked about before, that you have to be intentional about many things that need to happen, because as you said, when you sit one next to the other, maybe you can peek over someone else's shoulder and ask for something. You need some help, you need some mentorship, and this can happen very naturally at the workplace. While instead, when it's everybody's from his own home, that you have to create maybe some space for that is more intentional. People need to feel that they have the permission, to reach out to people, and it's not that they're bothering them. So maybe it's something that you have to structure at the more formal or intentional level.
Yeah. If you are ideating, say you're working with the designer or the product manager of a team, you're coming up with a new idea, you might want to be in front of the whiteboard doing things in a little bit more kind of casual way. Like instead of trying to figure out, okay, how do we do it in this piece of software or whatnot, it might be a lot easier conversation to do in person. It doesn't mean you cannot do it because, we thankfully we have great tools now that we can use to solve all those problems. But it's just easy, like just to
Yeah.
have a quick chat with somebody, a conversation. But it's all down to kind of the what benefit do you want to get, and there's companies depending on where you are located that you might not have great access to talent collocated,
Yeah.
so you open the door to talent from all over the world, and that's a huge benefit for the business. You might be in a place where there's actually a ton of talent, and you might want to remove that friction and just get everybody there together. And then kind of individuals as well, more and more are having more choices. So if I live in the kind of outskirts of Edinburgh, I'm not a big city person, so thinking of like, oh my god, if I had to live in the city just for my job, I think
Yeah.
I'm past that. I like kind of the space where I work and just have access to the countryside just the moment that I walk out of the door. But that's, different people trade off different things at different stages in their lives. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I feel the same. I mean, I'm based in Rome, Italy, so I totally get your angle that it depends where you're also located, the access to opportunities that you may have. So speaking of growth and personal and professional growth, I remember a recent interview of yours where you said that one of the key moments in your career was when you moved from engineer or individual contributor to manager, which is one of the most daunting parts of I think of people in tech. How was it for you, and do you have any advice for people who are going through this?
It wasn't easy because obviously you don't know what you don't know is a different role.
Yeah,
Like people think it's a promotion. It's not a promotion. You have a different job altogether.
yeah,
Um, so you need to figure out how to represent the value that you add, or even yourself, how do you measure kind of your satisfaction and making progress. As an engineer, I used to love, hey, I'm writing this code, I can see how it looks like. If we ship it to production, I can see customers
yeah,
using it immediately, so the feedback loop is super quick.
yeah,
As a manager, kind of it can be, you're still doing a lot of those things, your team is doing those things, but then you might question, it's like, okay, what what is the added
Yeah.
value? Am I just coordinating, or where do I add value? And sometimes the feedback loop, depending on the things that you're focusing on, might be a little bit longer. So
Yeah.
if you are on the people aspect, coaching people or what, it might take a while before you see kind of those people really growing and getting kind of that satisfaction. or or if you're working in a longer term strategy, it might be a little bit
Yeah.
longer before you start to see the impact. um, but you just need to find ways of like, okay, how do you break down your work? How do you know you're making the right progress on the areas that you're focusing on?
And and how do you get that feedback? Is it from other people that can tell you that you're doing a great job, or there are KPIs, indicators that you can rely on about the fact that you're doing things right, that you're on the right track?
I think you should always try to have some metrics, because ultimately our job is not just managing people, is deliver
Yeah.
outcomes for the business. I think you always need to understand the area that you own,
Yeah.
how it aligns with the business, what does success look like? Because if you don't do that, then you put yourself and your team at very, very big risk.
Yeah.
And you don't want to wait for a restructure or decisions made at the senior level to realize, oh, maybe we weren't adding that much value. We have all these costs, but we're not really adding much to the bottom line. So you should always make sure that whatever your team is owning, you have a way to, from a business point of view, speak to the value that it adds. And that then you question as well, is like, is the investment that I put in justifies kind of the outcome that we are kind of given to the business. So KPIs around kind of both, whether it's the revenue your team is helping to generate, or the savings that your team is helping to generate, the satisfaction of the customers that you're serving to, etc. So all those things are basic kind of health metrics for your team. Then you should also have a look into, engagement surveys for your team, and kind of more, not productivity, but like how, like more the execution
Yeah.
metrics for your team, so that you know that you are operating in an efficient way or not, and that you have kind of the right people, and that they are growing, and that they are actually kind of enjoying being in the company. So there's plenty of data that you can use to get a sense of how things are. But obviously nothing beats feedback, because you might have a view of the world, but if everybody else around you, they don't feel
Yeah.
that that's the value, you should always be checking on that, that more qualifying feedback, to get a sense of whether what you're reading matches the expectations of the
Yeah.
people around you.
I think this is a great conversation. You mentioned metrics that we can, and KPIs that we can use to even demonstrate, I think, value of the engineering work and advocate for engineering work. And this is one of the things that many tech leaders struggle, because there are other departments that have it easier. Let's say when you talk of product or sales, it's easier to connect more directly to the value that they bring to the business in terms of revenues or money. While engineering, sometimes, especially when you work on, when you do platform work or stuff that goes under the hood, it is harder. So, do you think that we should always make the case for advocating something because it brings more revenues, or because you can link it directly to something that is straight related to the business? And how to do that when it's not easy, when it is, maybe it's a
Yeah,
big investment in the platform itself?
I think we should be co-owners, and I think especially I lead some platform teams as well,
Yeah.
and they you should always connect what that platform delivers to the teams that the platform enables, and
Yeah.
what things they could not do if you weren't providing the platform, or what things would take them way longer to do if you were not providing
Mm.
that standardization and systems, or from a quality point of view, like availability of the platform or performance of those products. So there's many different ways that you can tie that. But if you are building a platform team, you need to make sure that you're not just building the platform for the sake of building the
Yeah.
platform, that you're always, whatever you're building is very clearly aligned with what the business is trying to do. And what is your job in there? Is it to accelerate their, how quickly they're going to be able to do it? Is it to make it more available and robust? But yeah, if you just focus on what you're building versus the value that it adds, that's a very clear recipe for disaster.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of being able to do things more efficiently and productivity, do you use productivity metrics like Dora or Space? Do you measure from this angle the output of the engineering teams?
We have Dora metrics. We use them more for us to give us kind of a little bit of a sanity check of like, okay, how are we doing? Is there anything that is going in the wrong direction? I think more from a developer productivity, we also rely a lot on feedback from the teams. I think
Yeah,
ultimately metrics can tell you, like you can be deploying every day 300 times,
yeah,
but that doesn't necessarily
mm,
tell you whether people are having a lot of friction in certain things. And actually, they could be deploying 600 times for all you know. So I think it's good to have kind of those metrics that you can track just for, how trends, how things are going,
yeah,
and compare yourself to other businesses. But nothing beats just
yeah.
surveying, talking to the people that are actually doing the job and understanding what it is that is getting on the way of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great because last week we had Catherine Kohler, who is director of engineering productivity at Netflix, and she basically said exactly the same thing. She said we use Dora, we use all kind of metrics, but we do a lot of surveys, and we especially rely on that for qualitative feedback because you may have the best numbers in the world, but then if people hate or despise your development process for whatever reason, they're right. I mean, so you have to act on that.
And one key thing is like the tools, like the, what us as a platform, what you can provide absolutely can impact kind of the productivity. But there's so many other things that impact the productivity as well that you don't get them with the metrics.
Yeah,
It can be maybe the relationship between engineers and product management and how long it takes to make decisions, or like
yeah,
we have a bottleneck with design. So when you do service, you can get more of a picture of
yeah,
like, no, actually, what is happening
yeah,
holistically and where is the best place to
yeah.
invest. Yeah.
So the dual question would be when it comes to metrics instead, to Dora metrics, for example, what is the right way of using them for you? So is it like to start conversations, to spot trends? Uh, how is it?
Yeah, I think, the good thing of Durametrics is you have benchmarks, and even
Yeah,
they tell you it's like, okay, where category you
yeah,
are. And then once are you making progress? And then kind of what trends, like one thing I remember, where was that? I think it was at Intercom. We were capturing some cycle time metrics
yeah,
and just different metrics. And I remember seeing, kind of looking at the trends, and then see this big drop for about a week or two. And we were like, wait, what happened there?
yeah,
It was actually the performance cycle process for the company when everybody's writing their reviews, giving feedback for peers, etc. And we could very clearly kind of see the drop on productivity from the engineering organization because like the team was very
yeah,
focused on other things. So that is really powerful data, because then you can go with this and say, hey, we need to simplify this process because it's costing us kind of 2 weeks of
yeah,
engineering productivity, and this is not that's just not, we
yeah,
should not do that. So I think just being able to spot those things, or
yeah,
if you have, you could compare different cohorts of people, and it's like, wait, why are those teams way, they're
Yeah.
seeing much better metrics than those others? And it might be simple things like, hey, these teams are doing, they only push things in bigger buckets, and these ones are pushing every little thing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that they're more productive or less, but it just makes you go a little bit deeper and see, actually, is there something there that we need to look at?
Yeah.
If you're adding more engineers, you should expect to see more deployments and more things. But if it stays flat, it's like, wait, actually, by adding more people, are we making things slower instead of faster? So it
Yeah.
just helps you ask the right questions of where to look at. I'm not a fan on looking at individuals
Yeah.
kind of metrics. I think is really valuable in more aggregate data. At individual level, sometimes it might be useful just as a signal. It's like, oh, that looks odd. Like this person hasn't submitted anything for 3 months. But
Yeah.
it's like, okay, let's go and let's have a conversation. And it might be very, I don't know, could be some really good reasons, but um, you just see what are the odd behaviors, and allows you to start a
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah, I love this. So basically, using this, approaching them from a curiosity point of view rather than prescriptive one of setting goals and targets.
Yeah, because somebody could be deploying 50 times a day and not adding any value, because what they're shipping is worth, it doesn't matter, it's just noise. So you can't blindly follow those metrics, because you will make bad assumptions.
Yeah, yeah, love it. So I have to sneak in an obligatory question about AI because we have always to do in interviews. So what do you see that AI is changing the way your teams are working, both in, I don't know, in coding, but also in processes and for managers? Are you able to embed it somewhere in the work of your team?
We're starting to explore
Yeah,
more of that, and experimenting with different things. I think in our case just now, we have some very clear areas where we can improve the way we work. So we focus more on addressing those things versus kind of adding some new things for us to experiment with. But I think the area where we are really looking at is more knowledge management, and kind of maybe kind of reviewing some, how would you write some tests for this thing that
yeah,
I've got here. So I think we are we haven't kind of yet gone very deep to get a lot of that value, but it's definitely it's important. Things are evolving so quickly that maybe something that didn't add a lot of value 2 months ago is important, 3 months later could be actually a very important and meaningful thing to add to your tool set. So it's definitely something that I think you need to keep on in
yeah.
kind of exploring what it is that is going to work for you and your business.
Yeah, and you're not concerned, for example, as a big company, as others do, about security or privacy. It's your own data that you're feeding, for example, external
Yeah,
systems. It could be ChatGPT or Copilot from GitHub.
yeah. Oh, you absolutely, like, you have to do it with your, we involve our legal team and
Yeah,
security
eyes
to
wide open.
ensure whatever that we do, that we feel confident on what we do. I think that would be my recommendation to everybody. It's like, it's great exploring, but like you can inadvertently maybe do something that is not very good news for the business. So explore with people that can help guide you on what is the level of risk that you want to take. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And do you think, I mean, for what you have seen so far, have you seen more adoption, for example, on the engineering side, people writing code with, Copilot and the likes, or even in other workflows, like could be, as you said, helping writing documents or summarizing stuff on the management side?
I think those are more the things that we're exploring in just now, and we are like we're actually very early on in some experiments to get more data. I think people are doing more for those productivity kind of hey, let's write this document, or like how that's how I use quite a lot, is just to
Yeah.
get you started with things. So I see some opportunities in there, but I think we're gonna go through quite a journey over the next few months, kind of, and
Yeah.
yeah, months, because this is not in years. This is in literally things that evolve in months, where you're gonna start seeing where you get more benefit.
Yeah.
We have a very diverse code base, so there might be parts where actually doesn't kind of work as well. Other systems that actually this can be very, very productive. So we need to understand kind of what are the different use cases where we think we can get more benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. There is this whole conversation around the fact that these tools, I mean, speaking of AI, but in general, tooling has improved all over the place in the past few years, make people more productive, engineers more productive. And so there is this tendency that roles are going to be maybe more technical, and managers are going to be more hands-on, or you're going to need less managers. For example, I spoke with Farhan Thawar, VP of Engineering at Shopify, and he told me that at Shopify, managers are very hands-on. They push pull requests. So, what do you think is do you think there is an evolution of the role of the engineering managers towards being more technical, more hands-on? Maybe you have few managers per number of engineers, or where do you see this going?
I think it's gonna be very different depending on the businesses and the values, and like what they prioritize
Yeah,
for the role. If you are an engineering manager, you should be a very technical person,
yeah,
because it's your job to be able to, you know, come up with like technical solutions. If your team is struggling, that's what you should be able to jump in and help make decisions, understand the trade-offs. Doesn't mean you need to be kind of very hands-on, but like you need to understand the technologies, you need to understand the trade-offs, you need to understand the opportunities. And if you're not very close to the technology, then you're not going to be able to do your job successfully, an aspect of your job successfully. There are some managers, I think for me it's always like, what is the most value that I can add to my team at
mm,
any one point. And for me, that's what drives. Like when I've managed, or have managers that are managing a very small team, and the team is blocked, it's like, hey, just go and help, like fix
yeah,
those things, get involved. If the big challenge that the team has is that they need to figure out this very complex setup of things that they need to do, collaboration with other people, or investing on the operational aspects of the health of the systems, etc., then that's where you can maybe
yeah.
add the most value. But I think you need to be versatile enough that you can go and do whatever job you need to do to help the team deliver on those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love this take. So basically, it's being able to recognize where is it that you can bring the most value. Maybe, for example, your team has already strong technical leadership, and you don't need to contribute that much in that. But maybe there is way more to do on hiring. I don't know, and then things change maybe from one time to the other.
Exactly. I think that's the problem, is that it's not always going to be the same.
Yeah,
And you need, that very senior person that's got you covered might resign tomorrow, and suddenly you don't have that person. So you have to be able to go in and step in. Maybe you start hiring another one, but like what happens in between? Like if you're not able to support the team in that way, then you have a problem. Yeah.
yeah. So we have covered so many things, from the role of managers, from your career, remote companies, companies work in offices. Do you have some advice about how people should think about their career? What kind of opportunities they should, and speaking of engineers, what kind of opportunities they should seek, kind of companies, how they should think about their growth?
Oh, this is so dependent
Yeah,
on the person, and kind of the things that they value and what they want to get out of it as well. I think the bigger advice for me is that regardless of the job that you do, is to really co-own the solutions. If you're working in a space and you're
Mm,
building an application, don't just take orders of what to build, wait for your Jira ticket to tell you exactly what you need to do. It's like just own it and really get deeply involved with the solutions that you are building, understanding the customers, the value that it adds to the business, because you will make much, much better decisions that way. And then optimize is like, don't get caught up on, okay, things are the way they are, and you just deal with it. It's like, always, if there's things getting on the way of you delivering great value and you think that they can be improved, get involved in doing that. Just, if your build takes 3 hours to run and you're just sitting idle, don't just accept that that's the way
yeah,
it is. It's like, no, actually, this thing should be, what can I do to help accelerate that thing and help myself be more productive? Is, if you take a seat back, that's when you're not growing, you're not learning, you're not adding a lot of value. So whatever you do, just get fully involved and understand how you add value to
yeah.
that
Don't
space.
wait for people to tell you where you should
Yeah.
contribute, but figure out by yourself where you can create value for your team.
I always say you own your own career. Your manager is there to support you, but ultimately you own your career and what you want to get out of it. And you should not kind of delegate that to anybody that is not you, because you know better than anybody. And whatever investment you put into that, you can take it to any job, because no job is for life. Like, we
Yeah,
don't know, things are going really well today, but tomorrow we have, you know you know an economic slowdown or
yeah,
whatever, and suddenly the job that you thought was very secure is no longer secure. So if you put all your career and everything in a place, it's very difficult to transfer. So always think about what it is that you need to be kind of hireable and valuable to any
yeah.
business. Yeah.
I think that's great advice, and that's the also the perfect parting advice for this interview. So thank you so much for Maria again for being here with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me, Luca.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.